Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Ideal Investor Show. And today I wanted to talk to you about something that I had mentioned before, where we have been speaking about how can we and what can we actually do when we follow for our investing approach to put reserves aside. And you know that I'm always recommending, especially if the rent allows it, to put 5% vacancy, 5% capex, and 5% for maintenance as reserve. And I had mentioned that tokenization accounts like Lofty, for example, that I'm using would be one option to actually store this money until it's needed. And while you're storing it, you're actually making additional income. But here is a little bit of a different twist that I wanted to bring you. And it comes basically with the title Blockchain's Big Real Estate Hack: Own Property for Less. And what is meant by that is, yes, you can use what's called tokenization to park your reserves. But there's another way how you can actually use this approach. And for anybody listening to us who hasn't really heard about what is tokenization, you need to have a little bit of a fundamental understanding of the technology that's behind it. So the first thing that you need to be aware of is something called the blockchain. Now, I know that this term has oftentimes been seen or heard or brought up in the context of cryptocurrencies, and it is true. But in this case, and in general, blockchain is just basically a form of accounting. And the beauty, since it's been invented, is that it works with what's called dispersed digital ledger. What's the benefit of that? Just in a really quick, short way. If you think about two companies that sell and buy goods from each other, and they send each other invoices, and then when they receive the invoices, their invoices get paid. In the past, it used to be that almost always, especially when you had a very high volume, there were small little minor incremental differences, because somebody mistyped the number when they entered the amount for the invoice, or somebody sent a little bit more money, or the money for one invoice went to the other invoice. There was always the risk and the reality that the invoices at the end of the year, basically what's called the ledger, when both companies at the end of the year added everything together, what did we buy and what did we sell between those two companies, the two numbers at the end typically didn't match. And now with the blockchain, because everything is instantaneously, you can see everything, and both ends for every individual transactions automatically acknowledge the correctness. It's always correct. The other thing is no transaction can ever get lost, because what's meant by dispersed or distributed ledger, it means the transactions exist on multiple computers. So even if one computer or one hard drive would ever go down or the paperwork is lost, because it's in a distributed network, you can find every transaction that participates in the network everywhere. So that's kind of increasing security and accuracy tremendously. And because it's all digital, it's basically instantaneous, like milliseconds or maybe maximum a second to complete a transaction. So that's basically what the blockchain is. So now imagine you were to be interested in investing in a particular kind of real estate in particularly interesting locations, let's say Paris or London or Acapulco or New York or San Francisco. It doesn't matter, whatever you deem to be a really attractive location. And the reason why you decide this to be attractive would be that the real estate in that location is increasing or appreciating in value significantly better than most other locations. So obviously with that in mind, you would say, wow, I would love to own some of the really, really well appreciating real estate. You're not thinking about renting, you're not thinking about property management or anything like that. All you're interested in is participating in this appreciation. In that sense, it's actually similar to buying a stock from a company where you really, really believe that they're going to grow rapidly and quickly, and you want to own their stock. Like anybody who's listening to this, if you look at the last 2 years about NVIDIA, well, if you knew what they were doing 2 years ago, I don't think there's anybody out there who wouldn't have loved to be able to buy some of their stock. I actually have a client in our community who was lucky enough or smart enough to do that, and he made a great profit owning that stock. So playing the appreciation game is really not that new, but playing it with real estate has been tricky, because if you wanted to do that, you kind of already need to be rich. If you wanted to have a highly appreciating apartment in New York City, somewhere in a penthouse, you needed millions and millions to ever be able to buy it. Now here comes the tokenization option on the blockchain. What does that mean? Let's say somebody has this apartment, and instead of selling it to one person, it's being sold to a platform that buys this apartment in the form of a company and says, okay, the company now owns it, and this apartment costs $1 million, and we basically offer shares for this apartment, and each share costs $500. So if my math is right, that would be 1,000. Yeah, so 2,000 shares of $500 each. And so now if you say, okay, I will want to participate in this great appreciation for this apartment, but I don't have $1 million. I only have $10,000. Well, then you buy 20 of those shares, or you could say I buy 20 of those tokens, and now you have that portion of that apartment that you own increases in value. You can sell your shares to somebody else just like you would sell shares of a company on the stock exchange. And the big benefit is not only that you can invest in a smaller amount into a high value, high appreciation asset, but you can also, without doing anything to the asset, having to go through the sales process, through marketing, through an agent or all that stuff, you can just offer your shares to both all the existing investors as well as any new investors who might be interested to also buy those shares. And you can sell them for any price that they are willing to pay. So that is something that didn't used to exist in real estate, and it exists now. And if you're asking yourself, well, how big is this market? How long and how much has this kind of established itself? For 2024, the estimate is that the tokenized real estate market is currently about $3.8 billion. That's basically the tokens. And the estimate going forward, because it's convenient, because it's fast, because it's very unbureaucratic, it's easy, it's always right because of the blockchain ledger, it's estimated to grow to 26 billion in 2034, so in 10 years. And I'm actually thinking this is potentially conservative. I think it could get even bigger if the legal and regulatory circumstances are established a little bit more than they are right now. So that is a little bit of a twist on how can you get into real estate for like $50 or $500 and not having to pay hundreds of thousands or $1 million to get into something really lucrative. I hope that was educational for you. If you like to talk about it, if you like to know how this works, for example, on the Lofty platform, please go to idealinvestorshows.com and find the button to book a call, and then we have a conversation about it. So be well and stay safe, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.